fun. It's international break after all. There are no games, so obviously, uh, you're a little with time, to try different things. So we thought that we would get some real Barca fans who will be engaged with and who have real good understanding of the game to come and discuss about the kind of team that they want, right? The kind of team that they would like to coach, provided they had some transfer fees and what have you. And then we took it a step further and we said, okay, that if there was a hypothetical team like that, how would that fare against Man City, which is probably now people accept them that they're the team of in European football. So what we have done is we've chosen two of Barca fans that many of you know, Robbie Poto and Dan. Dan, everybody knows, he has been doing this for years, and they have set up their own teams. Kind of like fantasy football, but we don't want to call it fantasy football, so whatever. And then Dom has created his version of Manchester City. Now, to keep it fair, we gave the individuals some money, some virtual money, not real money. But the basic thing was that each of the Barca team would get about $150 million, and they can buy players, but not from Man City, right? And then they could create their own team. And then based on that, we will put those teams against each other tactically and from a data perspective, and then we'll make a decision and a poll on what you guys think fares well, which team fares well or doesn't fare well, right? So there we have Robbie. He's not on camera, but he's participating. Dan, as always, welcome back, and Dom, obviously down there. You guys want to speak something before we go into introducing the teams and talking about some of the comparisons?
Yeah, I'll give the guests a chance to kind of just introduce themselves once again and promote whatever they want to promote. But yeah, guys, this is basically everyone wants to know how a dream signing would actually fit Barcelona, right? How Leao or Haaland or any of these players would actually play if they were in this Barca side. So we figured, okay, why not give someone like Dan or Robbie the chance to actually show us that on the tactics board and show us how they envision a dream Barcelona side with some limitations, as they've said. So money obviously is not infinite for Barca, far from it. So we decided to give this Barca, a dream Barca or a fantasy Barca, some limitations as well. But still, we'll have players in Flex Barcelona that are usually not there, obviously, and we'll see how they will interact with the other players that we have on the team. And it should be good fun, it should be good fun, especially when they are pitted against an elite team like Man City, who obviously on paper should still be winning against Barca. Like, who knows? I mean, maybe this Barca, dream Barca, will actually have what it takes to beat a Pep Man City. With that other way, though, guys, welcome again, and thank you again for joining. Dan, Robbie, any words from you before we just kick this off?
Yeah, I'll start if you that doesn't mind. I wanted to say that I actually think the current Barcelona team can beat Pep's Manchester City even with the injury of Rodri, and
Mm-hmm.
it would be even easier with a transfer budget of 150 million because what Hansi did in a few months is something incredible and can go under the radar that easily. But I do think that there are some improvements that we can make, and we can do some transfers, both me and Dan, that will most definitely elevate the team to the next level. In maybe in the even in the future, you can use it as a foundation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. Hey, everybody. What I'd like to plug from this show is actually you did guys with giving me this homework. I did get thinking about what transfers would improve Barcelona. Looking at the Nike deal, so you definitely got my gears grinding with this idea. So what I have to plug, of course, if people don't know me, it's the Barcelona podcast. It's literally everywhere on audio, podcasting apps, wherever, and then obviously on the YouTube channel. And then for match reviews, I've been doing watch alongs on a site called Big Up, which can be found pretty much anywhere. Again, that you might see tweets from me or we have a closed Facebook group called the Barcelona Podcast, Discord, wherever you find me, or Patreon as well. That could be. I'm on Big Up for watch alongs, and I'm also again with this idea considering doing some transfer talk in the next week on there as well. So if I'm going to plug anything, it's follow me on Big Up actually, and I'm going to do a live stream of transfer talk basically based on this conversation. So that's the next thing to plug. As I said, just find me everywhere on socials, the Barcelona Pod, anywhere you could find me. So, yep, there's me or Hilton D13. That's too many things to plug, but yeah, the Barcelona Podcast. Find it on Google and then follow me everywhere. So that is my plug, and let's have some fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Let's have some fun. So these are the two teams that Robbie and Dan have put together. As we said, there was limited money, so it's only $150 million. So the two key changes that Robbie has done is he's got Trent Alexander-Arnold and Rafael Leao, right? So Rafinha goes out and Kunde goes out, and these two players slot in. For then, he has obviously taken William Saliba in defense. And the other change that he has done is
Diogo Costa,
yes,
goalkeeper.
Diogo Costa in goalkeeper, right? So not Inaki Peña, not Ter Stegen, but Diogo Costa. So those are the key changes that these two gentlemen have made. I'll let each gentleman talk about his squad for like 2 minutes before we go to Man City squad. Dan, do you want to start?
Yeah, well, actually, I do have a question. I can't see for Robbie. Is he using Ter Stegen in goal?
Yeah, Ter Stegen. Yes, Ter Stegen actually.
Sorry. I was actually confused about the rules a little bit. I didn't realize. I thought it was not even the current squad, but I didn't know we were allowed to heal Ter Stegen's knee.
Oh,
I just thought I was allowed to throw Araujo back into the lineup. I might have done those things differently. So
right.
So just to the understanding, Araujo is injured in the Barcelona that you gave me, and Ter Stegen is injured in my Barcelona. But still, you want me to talk about my team a little bit here? Because I think I would still stick with this anyway, actually.
Yeah, all right, that's good.
Go ahead.
Go for it.
It's fine. It's fun anyways.
Yeah. So because we're highlighting so much of tactics here, my team and the choices I made were based on the tactics. So like Rafinha for me on the left wing, as I'm going to get into against Man City, is there because I'm also using Hansi Flick's tactics. So I'm happy with, especially with the numbers as well. So those are big parts of this. And so when I did my transfers, I'll give you the list of the names here. I wrote down on my sheet, I wrote Florian Wirtz 120 mil, Saliba 80 million, Messi 25 million, because Messi at 25 million on transfer market is just something fun to think about. So I had him there, and I also had enough money for my bench. By the way, I only spent 100 and whatever. There's 125 million is exactly how much I spent. So I did save 25 million to add Messi to my bench. I know you don't see that, but there you go. And then Luis Diaz was at 80 million. I had Leo at 75. There Emery for PSG at 60. Zubimendi at 60. Costa is 45 million. And I did have Kamavinga at 100 million as one of my options as well. So if you're just to go through some of my thinking, those were the names that I was circulating and all those different things. So Rafael Leao in particular, 75 million. I think that would have been the other idea. If I didn't, again, it would have been for me, for Saliba, it would have been Inigo Martinez again. But because I think with Araujo too, keeping him out based on his passing and everything, and then moving Kubarsi over to the left side was something I chose not to do based on tactics because I wanted to use a player that was going to be a little bit better with the ball at his feet in Saliba than Araujo is, with similar defensive numbers, just not that exact same foot speed. But again, Arteta also generally plays a high line, so that's why I went with that. I don't know. Do you have any other questions as far as, because I have numbers on Saliba and Diego Costa as well. Do you want me to really dive into all that right now?
No, we'll get into it with time because there's a specific section for it. Robbie, do you want to talk a little bit about your team?
Yeah, I actually asked Dom if I can heal the players up and use Araujo and Ter Stegen, and he said it's okay. I used Leo even with Hansi Flick's tactics because he's a vertical machine that can carry the ball from his own box and go it all the way. We saw that even last night when he scored that goal against Serbia, and it's a transitional machine that can be used as a nuclear weapon perhaps and destroy all the lines. I use Casado because I think Pepsi City can in a 3-1-6 build up can be very easily demolished with Casado's second ball winnings and reading of the game. even in the pocket, he can use that for himself and defend it very well. And I picked Trent Alexander-Arnold because he can find Leao, Lamine, Olmo in behind very easily and can actually form a four-box midfield with Olmo, Pedri, Casado if you want Pedri higher up, and if it's a bad game because Pep's a machine and a genius.
Yeah, those are interesting points. I like both teams to be honest. Both teams to be honest. And yeah, it's interesting to see Dan your team. So Saliba and Kubarsi, I like that combination because they, as you said, Saliba kind of gives you the ball playing and the defensive side at the same time, which you can't really say for Araujo, right? Araujo will do the thing, the physical things. He'll do the tracking back. He'll do the marking, all that stuff, but not as much on the ball, and that's important for Flick, right? So I can see the reasoning behind that. And then you have Diego Costa, who's also proficient in that sense, where you can actually combine with the center backs a bit more and offer you that first phase stability that Iñaki Peña probably doesn't, right, at this point. And we saw how much of a difference that makes when a team is actually pressing you well, which, to be fair, Man City and their pressing, that's kind of a tricky situation because they can be good, but at the same time, there are ways to play around it because they also lack physicality. They also lack some spacing. They lack the athletic nature, let's put it that way. On the other hand, you do have Robbie's team, and I liked Trent. I like him a lot. As he said, if you have outlets like Rafael Leao, you need to have the service as well. So, of course, Lamine is the service by himself, but then having Trent there just solidifies that. And I like it. These are good changes, guys. And I think it should make for fun viewing, at least. Yeah.
All right. Now, let's go to the Manchester City team against which this hypothetical teams will possibly play, and Dom's doing the talk around on that. So Dom, do you want to talk about Savinho, Grealish?
Yeah, it's a bit weird because this is not obviously a dream Man City lineup. This is a lineup that they could realistically field right now. And I went with Grealish instead of Nunes because we just didn't have the data for Nunes. So we just picked Grealish so we can actually compare him through stats as well. Obviously, that would be Nunes on the left, mostly is lately. And then you can have Rico Lewis kind of inverting into that midfield. And this is what Man City actually do in possession. A lot of times they do have a 3-4-3 kind of situation, and these are the names that you would see. Obviously, Kevin De Bruyne is someone who can also play, but he's just come off an injury as well. You can have Gundogan in there as well, but then again, it's all kind of game state dependent on what you actually want your team to do. And against Flick's Barca, I don't think Gundogan would necessarily be the best choice in that midfield to cover with Kovacic. I just don't think he has the legs or the space coverage to actually match up with Flick's Barca. So this is what I think would be a somewhat realistic option for Pep to go into this matchup.
All right, so you have it, all the three teams, and we will go and we will take a look into which ones are the most relevant and which ones stand a chance of winning. And we'll obviously ask your opinion as well. So there are about 22 players, obviously, in these two teams. We can't compare everybody to everybody because that will take about 5 years to do. So what we've done is we have taken the couple of new names that our Dan and Robbie have actually changed with their fictitious money, and we've compared them to see whether there are any insights or not. So I'll just quickly take you through some of that in this particular phase. So here we're talking about Diego Costa versus Iñaki Peña, who is the current goalkeeper of Barca. Any surprises, gentlemen, when you see this comparison chart? All for this year's data only.
Okay, so yeah, it was funny because I actually compared. When I was going through the numbers, I compared Diego Costa to Ter Stegen here. So I know it's not on this chart, but just to give a little more indication, that long percentage in particular is what I'm looking at, because here's some of the numbers here. First, I cared about why Diego Costa coming in for Ter Stegen would make sense in like touches per 90. So Diego Costa for Porto, that's who he plays for. So a lot of this stuff is all skewed by the fact that he's from the Portuguese league. So Diego Costa for Porto is 38.9 touches per 90. Ter Stegen was at 42.1. So a very similar number of touches per 90. And just looking at this for Iñaki Peña, it would likely be similar as well. Because obviously Hansi Flick and Barcelona play the same thing. For defensive actions, so you see how Iñaki Peña is way up there.
Yeah.
that is interesting to me because Ter Stegen is almost the opposite in that. So defensive actions is in when they come off their line to stop stuff from happening. So Ter Stegen comes out 15.3 yards per 90 for his defensive actions. Costa is at 17.3 yards per 90, which that just tells you that they're willing, very much like Ter Stegen, Costa is willing to come off his line and has really good timing per 90 and figures things out far away from his own line, which again is what you need in an elite keeper while you're playing a high line. So that did rectify some of the fears I would have had of Diego Costa playing on a high line. As for defensive actions outside of the penalty area, so we're going way high upfield, Ter Stegen is at 1.26 per 90, Costa is at 1.38, which again is a similar number, meaning they're getting upfield and they're making things happen upfield. When you're playing a high line, you need to keep your confidence to do that. And for crosses stopped, so when the other team is spamming crosses, how do you deal with that? Ter Stegen's at 5% across the stop, putting him in the 29th percentile. Costa is at 7%, putting him in the 70th percentile. So let me read that again. 5% for Ter Stegen in the 29th percentile. Costa is at 7% in the 70th percentile. So why I say that stat to you is, again, I don't want to disparage stats here, but that's a little bit of red herring there because you hear the percentiles from 29 to 70, from 6 to 7%, and then you realize that certain stats, no offense to this board even, but you throw out some of the stats because they don't really mean anything. It's all dependent on the other team throwing in crosses, and almost all keepers are between 4% and 8% of all crosses stopped, including Inaki Peña. So I don't really care too much about that. Now, the other two numbers I have for you here that I really liked is that 18.3% of Costa's passes, not including goal kicks, go more than 40 yards. So if you are playing in a high line, and we saw this exactly what happened when Barcelona lost to Real Sociedad the other day. And maybe I also created these moves based on that loss and frustratingly seeing Inaki Peña did struggle while Real Sociedad did not press him, the way that Man City likely would not be pressing Inaki Peña. So that's why I was trying to improve that position. So again, 18.3%, I'll say it again, 18.3% of Costa's passes, not including goal kicks, go more than 40 yards. That's all the way down in the fourth percentile. Ter Stegen is at 17.2%, putting him in also a very low percentile, which means, again, most of the time, as in almost 20% of the time that Costa is passing the ball, it's not going more than 40 yards. He is comfortable with the ball at his feet. He is comfortable playing short, and he's comfortable building out of the back, the way that obviously Barcelona would like to do, and move that team vertically as a unit in those phases of play. As we see with this Barcelona team, they like to basically build up narrow and then go vertical, go wide, go long, and hit those diagonals like they need to. Costa also hits those at a really high rate. The other thing, too, is we're talking about goalkeepers, and we're not talking in any way about stopping shots and actually doing the job of a goalkeeper. But for Costa, he's playing in the Portuguese league, so you put an asterisk next to it, and 53% of his games end in clean sheets, which has him in the 96th percentile, which means all the metrics we have for whether Diego Costa would be a good goalkeeper at a higher level, the answer is yes. Like, he's proven that he's a shot stopper at a high level as well. So at 45 million, I actually felt like, hey, that's a position from Inaki Peña to Diego Costa that I would like to improve upon. Again, those defensive actions I'm not too worried about because the numbers prove that Diego Costa does come off his line. And there's in the Portuguese league, it's more of, how often he's being asked to do this. He's not being asked to do this as much because Porto do control so much of balls, so much of games, and things like that. I'll be very quick. Saliba's 80 million. So again, that took my thing to 125 million. I couldn't.
Let me go on that, Dan. There are quite a few. So there is space for Saliba.
I only have one stat, but we'll get. But yeah, here we go. So let me just get into that real quick. 92% passing completion. That's all I care about. So again, I talk long about Diego Costa, but for Saliba, I mean, you see he's the red right here. So yeah. There's a little. I mean, the passes per 90 aren't as much. He's only 23 years old. I'm trying to see the rest of it here. So yeah, passes per 90 is less than Inigo Martinez, which is fine with me. But forward pass line much. But yeah, that dual number with to me, the idea was I'm adding Saliba because I'm giving you so much defensively of what Ronald Araujo gives you, but I'm having a guy that's basically just shuffling the ball around at 92% of the time and moving the ball up to Pedri, up to Gabi, or just giving it to Kubarsi. And Kubarsi, I'm putting a lot of the emphasis on making things, having things happen with the ball at his feet, very much the way that this Barcelona does as well. So I'm not really asking. I'm basically asking Saliba to do the job that Inigo Martinez does, except he's athletically quicker and just a better athlete.
This is a
And
comparison with Inigo. So you can see he's way behind on carrying, way behind on passes, way behind on quite a few parameters when you look at data, Dan. So
I'm
in
not.
this
Again,
particular
I'm
case,
not.
probably,
Yeah, you know, and again, this is where Diego Costa was all about the numbers for me. Saliba, it's just the eye test. I watched him. Over the summer in the Euros. I watched him with Arsenal, and I say, well, if you plug that individual player into this Barcelona team, I'm not concerned that all those numbers you see, passes, carrying, that Saliba will match those things. It's what he's being asked to do from system to system, and there has been no indications that he cannot, you know, he wouldn't exactly match Inigo Martinez in these categories if he was put in that Barcelona system next to Kubarsi, because I think his partner also matters quite a bit. So you add Kubarsi as his partner, then his carrying is going to go way up, his passing is going to go way up, and yeah, so that's why Saliba at 80 million, I actually think that's almost a steal for the player he is, and that's why I add him to that. So
well,
that's why I went with the two picks I did.
well, that was Dan with the explanations, and we saw some of the comparisons. For me, it was interesting to see Inigo and William Saliba's comparison, because one would not think that this is what we would see. So that was interesting, and the way Hansi Flick's Barca play, yeah, that was kind of interesting, and we'd love to see, we hear from people who are watching on how they feel about it. But let's keep going. Now we have a comparison between Rafinha and, let me see, Leao, because that's what Robbie did. So he took out Rafinha, and or maybe Rafinha's on the bench, and Leao's a person. So any surprises here, Robbie?
I This is the first time I actually see the radar in front of my eyes, but there is no surprise, no doubt, no doubt. Look at the carries and the attacking actions, something that Rafinha maybe lacks. He's more of a clinical. Like if you give him one chance, he definitely makes the most out of it. But Leo, you just know he has 100 chances, and maybe 70 or 80 out of them, you'll definitely penetrate behind the lines or or beat a man or find a cross, or either he scores. I think Leo at the moment is one of the most important players in the whole Serie A, maybe if not the best. He's carrying him, and Tijani Reinders are carrying that Milan side, and most definitely will win the MVP from Serie A. And I actually love about Leo how he's a complementary profile to Lamine Yamal, and not an Lamine to the second power, because I think Kvaratskhelia and Nico Williams is that. A lot of people ask if why not Vara, why not Nico Williams, because they are too similar with Lamine Yamal, and we need to have something to disrupt the left hand side or right hand side of the opposition. And alongside Balde overlapping Leo or underlapping Leo, and maybe taking from a 2v1 action, a 1v1 action, leaving Leo lonely, can find easily Pedri or Olmo on the edge of the box and find the back of the net very easily.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. And Dom, I'll pass it on to you, because we just talked about your declining stock on Leao and support on Rafinha, given his importance to the team. Do you have like a couple of comments, especially looking at the data? It was a bit surprising for me to see the attacking actions and the carries part of it, and some of the other stuff. Any thoughts, Dom?
Yeah, they are fundamentally different profiles, as Robbie kind of alluded to, because Lao does like to receive defeat, and then he will attack you from the deep. He will carry the ball. He will attack that space and his man. Take him on. And in that scenario, he's virtually unstoppable, right? Once Lao gets going with the ball at his feet, you don't stop him. You just can't control him 1 versus 1 anymore. Whereas Rafinha is more of a player that will receive the ball in space rather than 2 feet, right? So it's very, very different, and it changes the whole dynamic of the team. So that's why you have to have balance in those teams. If you take out Rafinha and put in Leao, it will obviously, in a vacuum, Leao is a better player. We don't argue that. Quality alone, data confirms it. Leao is a higher quality player. Let's put it that way. However, it's about the collective, right? So if you take out Rafinha, do you lose out on the balance of the front three? And Robbie talked about this because you do need players that are complementary. So Lamine, Lewandowski, and Leao versus Lamine, Lewandowski, and Rafinha. Which front three can gel together better? Which can give you the better balance? So Rafinha, Lewandowski, and Lamine, you have a runner, goal scorer, a poacher, and then a creator, which is a good balance on paper, right? We see it work on the pitch as well with Leao, Lewandowski, and Lamine. You do have two creators, but different type of creators, right? Lamine, more of a distributor, Leo, more of a carrier with some game-breaking potential, and then you have a poacher down the middle. Now the question is, which front three gives you better balance, right? It's all about that at the end of the day. Now, why my stock on Leao is kind of declining? It's all about how much is Leao's kit worth to Barcelona financially. If you buy Leao for 80 million plus, is his skill set worth that money to Barca? Or if it is, then yes, splash that money. If it's not, if you can replicate what Leao does through other means, then that stock kind of decreases, right? Now it's all the question about that. And I also like the point with Balde, because does Leao unlock Balde? What I think Balde does best is when he's not forced into situations where he's not comfortable. So when he goes up the pitch and has to command the whole flank, I don't think that's what Balde is best at, right? So would Leao on that left flank kind of enable Balde to do what he does best? That's my main question about that signing. So that's kind of my thoughts on this transfer. I like it. Of course, I do like it. Because Leao is Leao.
You as well more as we go, and you'll tactically analyze. But I just wanted to share your first little thoughts on the Leao conversation topic. Okay, let's keep moving. Robbie also changed Trent Alexander-Arnold for Jules Koundé, and this is how their radar charts kind of look like. Any thoughts, Robbie?
I did change Trent with Koundé because we all know Koundé is the better defender and nobody doubts that. But when you have Araujo there in behind of Trent Alexander, and Araujo is the best channel defender, maybe our top three alongside Rudiger and Konate, the way the Uruguayan uses his hands and the power and pace he has to defend the channels and actually cover up maybe the space that Trent leaves in behind, because when he receives the balls, he likes to go forward and find the man in behind. I actually think Trent will unlock even more the already beautiful midfield we have, because as I said earlier, we can do a 4-box midfield, something we saw alongside under Xavi when he used Cancelo right there and had a 3-2-2-3 build up. And Trent and Lamine Yamal is a dangerous right hand side that I don't think any left hand side in the world can compete with that, or maybe prevent that, because you saw how great Lamine finds Koundé and the interchanges they both have, and now we imagine Trent, who's the best right back in the world in that position.
Absolutely. So that's a little bit on Robbie's choices, and we've gone a little bit further to see how these stack across Man City. So we took Diego Costa across with Ederson. Guys, any thoughts?
I mean, obviously, Ederson is the kind of the player that you look to when you talk about these goalkeepers that can actually play with the ball, that can create with the ball, that can combine with the back line. And again, Dan talked about this a lot with these stats. Well, goalkeepers can be very, it can be strange to analyze them. It's not enough to just put them in a vacuum. You have to actually put them in context of the team that they play for. And that's true for every player, but especially for the defense, because defenders and goalkeepers, they can suffer a lot statistically if you don't put their data into context, right? And we have seen this even today now. But I think on the face of it, they do offer you similar things in the build-up, which is what we kind of focus on, because both teams, both Flex Barca and Pep City, they are all about that first phase, right? That first phase is very, very important to both teams. And that's why both of these goalkeepers are actually very good at what they do for their own teams and for our imaginary teams as well.
All right. So that's on Ederson. We'll keep going a little bit further. And what we did was we also compared with Akanji, Dom, because with
I know. Yeah, the same thing as Inigo, I think. It's the same story as with Inigo. I think Saliba or Akanji in a Barca setting would probably fare similarly, and the
So
same.
very different, no? It's
Yeah, on
different.
yeah, the Raiders are quite different. But again, it's very difficult to analyze this data alone without the tactics. But yes, on paper, very very different. I don't know, Dan, Robbie, any thoughts on these things?
Well, the things that I was having thoughts on, especially like I'm not trying to disparage Robbie's selections, but some of my picks, especially to keep, and I'm actually looking at the feedback here too on social or in the chat, and people like Robbie's team because he's adding Rafael Leao, which I mean, yeah, of course makes a ton of sense. Like we said, like I think on paper, the people that are seeing this are seeing that Rafael Leao is a 1v1 upgrade to Rafinha because offensively he is, right? And I think because Barcelona, you expect them to have possession 60 to 70% of the time. So to that point, I think what we're looking at is 60 to 70% of the time when Barcelona have the ball. And I think when we look at lineups and we look at adding players and what that looks like, we always consider, we imagine them in our mind's eye, scoring goals, doing things with the ball, dribbling with the ball. So, for example, like my choice actually to keep because again, I told you I thought about Rafael Leao. I watched him for this, and the reason why I didn't go with him is because of the actions that are not in the chart. I'm Dev. I'm not disparaging the charts, but
No, no, no. I
I'm saying
totally.
like defensively is why I kept Kunde because if I'm taking out a player like Kunde for Trent Alexander-Arnold, I think that Kunde defensively supports Lamine Yamal and allows Lamine Yamal vertically to be that
I
player
agree
who
with
he
you.
is, right?
I totally
And
agree with you.
and the same thing in the case of, again, no offense to Rafael Leao, but I think what Rafinha adds to Barcelona defensively is completely necessary against a team like Man City.
Again,
Because
I
Man
agree with you.
is
For
also
fixed
a
Barca,
team.
I think both Kunde and Rafinha are a better fit for Barca. I agree.
Well, because then the idea too with Man City was that they're likely going to have more possession than Barcelona. So if Barcelona only have 45% of possession in this game, that's why I would prefer Kunde and Rafinha. And I figured by adding Diego Costa, again, a keeper that I know, as we just looked at that chart against Ederson, Diego Costa, as far as a shot stopper than Ederson, is a better shot stopper. So if Barcelona have 45% of possession against Man City, the idea was, hey, I want a goalkeeper that can both do the things they need to with the ball from the back and stop shots. That's why I spent 45 million on Costa, which again was a bit of my budget. And then again for Saliba, I'm adding a player that defensively you're not losing it, or if anything, you're improving upon Negro Martinez with a similar passing numbers out of the back. As I said, like, and then I'm making the excuse that I believe that he would then adapt to that position. So my also thinking too with these numbers that aren't going to tell the whole story is that I watched the Man City. Both goals against Brighton last week were scored through the middle. Without Rodri, they just don't have the same
They are the same.
through the middle. And then the other idea, as Dom in the lineup you built, you actually, it was funny enough, you didn't put Rico Lewis at right back, you put him in the middle because we can expect that and I like that though, because that gives us the notion that if Man City are going to have 55% of possession in its hypothetical games, then Rico Lewis largely is going to be into the middle to create that double pivot. We're also seeing recently tactics like with Man City. There are times when Lewis is stepping even higher to create a diamond in that midfield. And I think that is what Pep Guardiola would like to do against this Hansi Flick Barcelona. The goal for City, of course, is to have three at the back and then to get the ball quickly to the wingers in 1v1 situations. And again, that is why it was the only thing that to Robbie's team that is interesting to me is almost our Gabi versus Mark Cosador debate. Because Gabi's available, I did kind of cheat and make him 90 minutes healthy as opposed to what he is now, which is averaging 14 minutes since he came back, right? Or 18 minutes. So I'm kind of cheating and going with a January version of Gabi. But in that midfield with Rico Lewis in there, the other reason I kept Kunde is because I really want to be able to overload the middle of the field the way the Hansi Flick's Barcelona does. And I think having Rafinha, that was the other idea to keep Rafinha in there because Rafinha is going to have to defend more centrally because Man City are trying to do the same thing and trying to overload the midfield. So the width from Barcelona is going to come from Lamine Yamal on the right side. And as we saw in the Euros, Spain playing a similar way, as I think what Barcelona will have to do against a Man City, I do trust Lamine Yamal to be that right winger and take enough. I think, if anything, Leo kind of stretches Barcelona out a little too much horizontally when they're trying to defend. So again, I'm not trying to disparage Robbie's team, but again, that's kind of the argument that I'm making for the players that I chose and why I didn't. Again, I considered Leo and I didn't go with him for those reasons.
I wanted to ask this. This is the final comparison before we pass back the game because we need to play the game anyways. But Dom, back to you. Guardiola. I was interested. I was pleasantly surprised when I saw this. Any thoughts before we move to the game?
Yeah, just a little disclaimer. The reason why we're comparing Trent to Guardiola is because, as Dan said, we don't have a right back
Right
for
back.
Man City. Not really, right? You can compare Trent to Rico Lewis, but the data is just too drastically different. So the profiles are not even, they're not similar at all. So
Yeah.
there was not a direct like for like comparison for him. So we chose to use someone who's a wide defender for City, someone who can actually be someone who's good on the ball as well, because Guardiola is good on the ball as well. Maybe not to the extent of Trent, because Trent is a crosser, obviously, from the data here, but they both give you offensive qualities, right? Guardiola can chip in with goals, even Trent is more of a creator. And then obviously, I think Guardiola is a better defender as well in general. So it's a difficult comparison. Again, there's no like for Trent. I don't think there's a like for Trent in Man City, at least not in the back line, right? So in that sense, we wanted to do this with Guardiola. It might not be the most accurate of comparisons, I'll give you that, but it was kind of the closest that we could get. So from that perspective,
So
yeah.
I'll ask this final question and I'll pass it back to you guys, gentlemen, to do all the fancy stuff on the board. Why not Quara instead of Nico or Leao?
I already answered that question when I.
Yes, you did. I would love to hear from the rest. Any thoughts, guys? Because they're waiting, they're watching. They deserve us to engage with them. Tom, Dan.
Can you give me just a second? I'll just set up the board while you guys discuss Quara, and then I can give my thoughts. Yeah.
Yep. Dan, you want to take this?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think if you're adding a player like Leo, you're adding him for the 1v1 ability that he already has, right? So I think that was kind of, to me, I'm not making a like for like comparison. Oh, well, I guess why not Nico Williams is kind of the point of inconsistency right now. Like, I think if you're going to spend big, you're going to spend big on Leo, and I think price tag does matter. So it's not that Karada isn't an adept player, because again, we're arguing that these players are I get 1v1, that they're better than the other one or not as good as the other one. So especially when you're asking of wingers, I really do compare all three of them honestly to Lamine Yamal, because right, if you're adding a player in, what I'm so impressed by Lamine Yamal, I'll say it here, is that his floor, I should say, in every game. Can you think of a game that Lamine Yamal in the last 7 months has been missing from? No, like his floor in his worst games, what he gives you and provides you changes matches, right? And I think with Kavada, my issue is almost the same thing with Leo. That's like in the matches where I say, what did they do in this match? Or if they've gone missing, then they go completely missing, right? And so that's why I actually keep Rafinha, because Rafinha defensively, at his minimum, what Rafinha gives you in his worst matches this season has still been something that fundamentally helps the team, right? So I think why not Kvara instead of Nico or Leo? I think it's a really hard question to answer, because all three of them are actually very, very similar in what they add. And I think, BJ, your argument that what Kvara adds defensively, I think there's an argument for adding him into the team as opposed to Leo. I think you do have an argument there based on what he adds defensively. Because again, I'm trying to think about both sides of the ball, both with and without the ball.
Now that okay.
I
That's
wanted
it.
to add
With
something.
this, sorry, go ahead, no, Robbie. Sorry, go ahead.
I wanted to add that Leo also gives you some fluidity in attack, because Leo, we saw something this season when Rafinha and Leva interchange when we attack from the right hand side and Lamin goes centrally, and Rafa actually attacks the first post and Leva back post, and Vara doesn't have that skill set yet to attack the center and change with Leva the positions. When Rafa already did this, but it will be even nicer and more comfortability with Leo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Robbie on that point, though. Like, I do think that Leo, I said, like, to his ceiling, why not Kvara instead of Leo? Like, I think you go with Leo because he does have the higher ceiling. And if Hansi Flick can extract his value or get the best out of him, if you want to call it that, there is no team that can defend against a combination of a finisher the way that Lewandowski is in form. Because I really thought it was funny, too, Robbie, that neither you or I took out Lewandowski. Because I did look at that. I mean, you could say it's Holland or there's other forwards that you could put in, But with his form, Lewandowski's in great form. So how are you trying to amplify him? And to that point, creating more space for him in the box by meaning Lamine Yamal's got to be constantly doubled. Leo would also need to be constantly doubled and shifted over. So that's making Lewandowski even more available. So I completely understand offensively as well the argument for Leo. Because again, I just think his attacking ceiling is that much higher than Kvara, and he requires that much more attention than Kvara does. Like Kvara, there are moments when you could go 1v1 against him, as in defensively try to defend him 1v1. And right now, Leo is just, he's not that. You need 1.5 to be defending Leo at all times.
All right. So that was some interesting conversation. And now we'll go to the good part of the thing.
Yeah.
We'll actually talk about which team has the best chance to win against Man City, or does Man City win against both? Can Dom prove that? So with that, Dom.
Yeah. Just before we do that, if I can ask everyone to share the links, Dan, Robbie, if you can just give us a retweet on Twitter, so the more people can join for this part as well.
Yeah,
and
retweeted.
Oh, okay, that's good. Okay, excellent. Then, Dev, is there a way to change the titles, because the titles of our video are not showing? That just it says live on restream. For me, we don't have the title. Yeah, so I think people don't know what we're doing. So I think that's kind of limiting the viewers intake. But it's fine. I will, while you potentially deal with that, I will transfer us to the tactics board, and we can actually try and do some tactics a little bit. Bear with me for a second. Right. Can you guys see this now? Dev, can you just enable my screen share, please?
Yeah, I can. Hold on. But I have not. I'm not. 1 second. Yes. There you go.
All right. Right, there we go. Okay, so that's kind of this Man City team with Dan's team first, right? Okay, so we have Dan's Barca and we have Man City on the pitch. I did put, like, here up there, you can see these are some of the things that Man City do in possession, and then some of the things that do, out of position, right there. And I'll talk first obviously about what this Man City like to do, and then Dan can tell me what his Barca team, what he wants his Barca team to do in possession and out of position as well. So basically, what happens with this Man City team that we've created, which is kind of an imaginary, but at the same time, I think this is what they have available. So this is what they would actually do. They do like to start with a 3-4-3. So you can see this line of three people in the back line. They do have Guardiola on the left. So we've put Diaz in the Kanji. It doesn't have to be them. Mostly it would be. And then Rico Lewis is someone who starts on the right side over here, but then he would invert or even go and play higher up the pitch. Obviously, they don't have Rodri, so they have Kovacic here kind of as the pivot in this sense. And then they have Foden between the lines, joining the front line, and Silva kind of doing the same thing. So when Man City, what they like to do in this area here, when Kovacic drops here, so this is what will happen, right? You have a double pivot, you have these players up there, and then Rico potentially screening the defense right here. So what happens is they have a line of these four players in the first phase, including Ederson as the ball-playing goalkeeper, and they have a great ability to actually control the game. And as Dan says, they are likely to have more of the ball even against this Barca side because they are just so good at tallying high touches. So touch volume is always going to be big for Man City, and ball retention as well. They have this kind of a diamond in the first phase that can keep the ball against high pressure, they cycle possession, and then look to find isolations up top. And that's what they do really well. I've put isolation wingers here. Of course, this would usually be Nunes and Savinho. So if you have these players there, they would be your isolation wingers. And Pep wants his players, so these players on the side, to be 1-versus-1. So if he has Nunes against Koundé and Savinho against Balde in the 1-versus-1, he's done his job in the first phase, right? He wants this to happen as much as possible. But what City do really well is they do so two things. They will either drag you out, so they will kind of want Barcelona to step out and press them, and then they will bypass that press. Or alternatively, what they do is they create this 3-5 if Rico is here, or a 3-4-2 1-6 even when Rico is higher up the pitch, and then he can kind of roam this area just between the lines, and that's how Man City want to pin you down with numbers, overload the first line, and then use a roaming 10, isolation wingers, and potentially people like Guardiola going from the second phase and kind of attacking this space, and potentially even scoring goals from deeper areas. So Man City obviously have a lot of quality there. They have players who can individually hurt you, but they do have some of the weaknesses, which we will talk about very, very soon. So this is kind of the basic premise. Oh, what did I do there? Sorry. Yeah, there we go. Basic premise of what I think Man City like to do in possession. Obviously, they have a Haaland there who's always going to be a focal point. He doesn't is not always as involved, but he doesn't really have to be at all times because he generally scores a lot of goals. We know this. So the question would be, how can Barcelona actually defend against this line of 5 or 6 players? Because what teams normally focus on when they defend against City is they usually pack this area, right? This middle area is what you need to defend the most. Because if you give Man City space in this area, so in this pocket right here, you're probably dead, right? They will tear you apart. They will cut through you, and if you allow access to these key targets there, that's when they can do the most damage. So to me, looking at this Barca side and Man City side is, how does Barca play into this? And then I will come to you next because this is your team. It's very, very interesting because what we see from Barca is usually the high press, but this City team, they want you to press, right? And Barca, what they often do is they put a high line. We know this. They have a very high line, but then sometimes, even with a high line, they don't put as much pressure on the first line, right? So they will play a high line in a very, very compact and narrow shape, which does kind of invite passes over the top, right? If you do have players like Guardiola, and then you have someone, a runner like Haaland, who can make these runs better than most players out there in world of football, and he is also physical and athletic enough to do this, and then of course his goal scoring abilities are well known. How does Barca actually play into this Man City team?
Okay, yeah. So a few ideas. I see that the way we're talking about Man City is with them having the ball. So
Yeah.
the lines that you just drew were the
Mhm.
ones that I'm talking about as to why I added Saliba, like why he was my choice to add that in. Because if
Mhm.
you're going to deal with Holland, you look up and down the center backs and say, who can I possibly add to my team to be able to deal with um, Holland as they try to overload the midfield. So the other thing I will say, optimistically about the middle of that park there, with
Mhm.
Rico Lewis, as you said, shielding or basically being the player to try to keep that ball in. Now you're asking Rico Lewis and Gabi, if Barcelona don't want to be off to the races, you're saying it's Rico Lewis versus Gabi in a 50-50. And I like that matchup. I like that
Mhm.
matchup for Barcelona to win that 50-50. That's why I picked Gabi, right? And then I also saw, as you move Guardiola up to kind of being part of that
Yeah.
attack, right? I look at who's that player that he's supposed to be defending that is going to be, oh, is that Lamine Yamal wide open on one ball, right? So it's like the more that they want to press the middle of the field, then now you're putting Lamine Yamal in a 1v1 situation, right? So coming the other way, I know we don't think of Barcelona as a transition team, but I think this
Mhm.
Barcelona team is built because even Olmo, look at Olmo's position into what you have right now. If Kovacic is going to attempt to step forward, now you have Olmo in a 1v1 situation going down the middle. And I think the conversation that we're having for Man City is different with Rodri. And
Mhm.
Rodri is not available, right? So I would have maybe picked different teams, or I would have gone with potentially a winger or another attacker, or I would have upgraded Balde's position, by the way, because yes, that Balde against Savinho is kind of a concern. But when we talk about left backs in world football, there wasn't a name that I wanted to or trusted at any number to. I'm going to say I'm going to stick with Balde here defensively against Savinho, right? And I think that's
Mhm.
a concern about a position. But yeah, I mean, I like Barcelona's chances, and if it's Olmo against Kovacic coming vertically, going the other way with the ball, I
Mhm.
like Barcelona's chances in that kind of
Mhm.
position. And then I also think about Rafinha Rafinha is going to kind of pin Akanji back enough as a runner. I also think Rafinha defends really well coming into the middle of the field. I think we've also seen this season on set pieces in particular, Lewandowski has also defended well. I've credited Lewandowski a number of times this year that defensively his work rate is better than it was last year. He just seems healthier. So I like the fact that this Barcelona team under Hansi Flick is just so competent and confident in the center of the park, which is what Man City wants to do. So that was my idea. Like, can Barcelona be better in the middle, win those 50-50s, and then get out wide and impact the game through Lamine Yamal in a 1v1 against Gvardiol? And that is kind of what I'm trusting Barcelona to do. So again, that's why I added Saliba, because I wanted a player defensively who's going to, basically give me the best opportunity to deal with that overload in the middle of, to your point, Dom, that 3-1-6. Because very much like Xavi's Barcelona, Man City basically want to play all their forwards up top and keep you pinned back as deep as possible. Again, why I went with Diego Costa. If you're going to be pinned that far back, I need a center back. I need two center backs that I trust with the ball at their feet. I need one goalkeeper, or I need a goalkeeper that I very much at a highest level trust with the ball. And then again, the wings, that's where you're running. Balde's getting forward. As we know, Barcelona are basically also attacking in a 3-4-3. Yep, in a 3-4-3. The same way, right? Like in its truth, like with Hansi Flick and Pep Guardiola, it's no surprise that they were both former managers of Bayern Munich. So there are similar ideas with his positional play. So I think, Dom, you could move around these little players depending on who has the ball until your finger falls off, right? But until you actually simulate it and went through it, I do like Barcelona's 1v1 matchups in a lot of different positions, and I did add to my team players that I think enhance the ability to play with the ball against Man City, but more importantly, play against Man City while Man City have the ball. Again, that's why I'll say top tier shot stopper, because again, this Man City side are going to get their opportunities. So how can you stop in the 6 big chances they're going to create in every game?
Yeah, that's a good point, and that's why I kind of wanted to start with Man City in possession, because that's kind of the assumption that we're making here. Okay, they're going to have the ball. How can Barca press them? And that's kind of what I just want to touch upon a bit more. Dan, so how would you use Flick's pressing system, the same one that we see, because this is kind of what Barca do, right? They use their wingers to kind of press from outside in, which would be Rafinha and Lamine, and then they kind of drop Lewandowski and, let's say, Olmo in this case, on the pivots, which would happen like this. But then Man City do play with a back three, right? And they do have Ederson. And Kovacic will maybe drop a bit deeper to maybe receive the ball. But you are playing 2 versus 3 in the best case scenario in your press here. So would you press this Man City side, or would you drop off slightly? And then you have Gavi and Pedri as your channel defenders, which could be a bit problematic. I mean, you could still do it if they track the runners well. They would be theoretically on Foden and Silva here, with Haaland kind of pinning maybe Kubarsi and Saliba. But what would be your off-ball strategy in this case?
I mean, is there that much of a difference between Man City and Bayern Munich? I think it would be a similar press that Barcelona employed against Bayern Munich, because I mean, that's again a team that's full of players that can play out of the back as well. And Bayern Munich have proven this season that they can do that when they're confident, when they're on their game. So this press from Hansi Flick hasn't really given any indications. With the 11 that I'm using, it hasn't given any indications that they cannot handle even Diaz and Gvardiol and Akanji and Ederson. So,
it's interesting because generally what we see with Hansi Flick's pressing is that it kind of it prioritizes certain players, right? And then leaves certain players largely free, right? So if you have a traditional right back, he would normally be left open with this Barca press, right? But they don't have that. So they do have more body centrally, so to speak, which kind of plays into Barca's pressing anyway, because normally what we would do, we would leave these areas free, right? That's what usually happens for Barca when they press, but they don't really have anyone in these pockets. So now the question is, would they adapt that? Would they put Akanji here and then switch to a back 2 and then potentially play through Akanji and try and combine with these players forward? Because if you give Man City easy access to these targets like Savinho or Nunes, or especially Haaland, with the way that we press, it could get problematic, right? In that sense, if you're giving them time and space, Man City will use time and space better than most teams out there still, even though they're struggling a little bit nowadays. But okay, that's an interesting point. Anything else to add, gentlemen, before we can actually move to Robbie's team next, if there's nothing else to add here.
No, my Barcelona is going to beat this Man City team. That's all I need to know.
That's good. Okay, let's do the same thing. I'll just keep sharing. So what Robbie has done, he's put Leao in there, obviously, and we have Araujo and Kubarsi, right? But they're swapped, right? Is it this way, Robbie? I forgot. And then we have Trent here.
Left, you'll have Leao. Yeah, that's basically it.
That's
Yeah,
basically
and
it.
Casado.
Yes,
Oh,
Casado.
right, Casado. Yeah, you're right. Sorry. There we go. Casado. Next to Pedri.
And Ter Stegen. You got to throw
And Ter
Ter Stegen.
Stegen. Oh, yeah. Ter Stegen. Yeah, Ter Stegen.
Then if you don't change that, you just nullify one of the changes I made. You wasted 45 million of my euros.
We'll know for next time. Right. So, Robbie, what's your thinking? Are you going to compete with Man City for possession? Are you going to try different? You do have outlets, right? You do have Leao, who can be. He's a ball to.
And where do you think you have risks, Robbie? Where do you think
First of all, as
might
Dan said,
struggle?
sorry for interrupting. First of all, as Dan said, it will be very hard to maintain possession against an Pep Guardiola's team, and it will be quite suicidal if you try that. But even if you have 45% of possession, I think that's why you need Trent Alexander-Arnold and Leao, because with minimum possession, you can get the best out of them, and they'll have maybe 50 touches per game, but you just know that with that 50 touches per game, you will get clinical and you will have a lot of chances. And out of possession, I don't think we will struggle that much because as we saw with Girona, they start with the same build up with a 3-5, and Grealish is actually at the half line with Trent pushing on him, and Araujo and Kubarsi maintaining with Haaland, and Casado and Pedri, of course, keeping an eye on the pockets. It's a quite good setup if we look at the Girona game and Bayern game also. But Bayern, of course, missed Pavlovic and he's a build-up cheat code.
Mm-hmm.
Lewandowski can drop on the pivot on Kovacic and leave Diaz with the ball, because Diaz is not like a Vardiol or a Kanji type with the ball, or he cannot carry it or break the lines, or he's not that dangerous with the ball, and we can leave him open to be the receiver, him and Anderson, and Vardiol can be the most dangerous and can fight the Kubarsi type of ball where he can break two lines at the same time and find either Silva or Foden. But the problem with Foden is that Casado is a is a kryptonite perhaps right now for them, because the way he leveled up his game from La Masia and from Barcelona B and stepped up to be one of the most important players under Hans is something incredible. He can keep an eye for him very, very, very well, and I don't feel threatened by his exposure.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, so what will kind of be your approach? Do you think so in possession? Let's actually talk about the in possession a bit, because and then I kind of skipped your in possession. We can talk about that a bit more later. So Robbie, in possession, what is so? I'll put it like this. So what with Man City when they defend, they usually have two ways, right? 4-4-2 mid block, which can have certain liabilities, like they will put up a high line, but sometimes Haaland and Foden is a very good. He can be a very good pressing trigger, but Haaland sometimes he works well off the ball. Sometimes he doesn't work as hard off the ball. But it's mostly a 4-4-2, where they will have. Let me just check. Let me just put it like this: more of a 4-4-2 mid block when they defend off the ball, or a very man-to-man high press. But they don't have the physicality, right? They don't really have They don't really have athletes to press, and often Kovacic and Silva or Gundo, and even in these situations, they do have a lot of ground to cover, and they can get exploited in those areas. As good as they are, they can get exploited. So let's see, how would you set up this team in possession? Let me see. I'm guessing almost somewhere in there. Casado a bit deeper.
This is my team, right? Or this is Robbie's team. Well, that's okay. You don't have to change them back. Like you don't have to change them back. Because the only thing I have to add to this, really, I've said most of it.
Mhm.
Even if Leo, let's just imagine he Rafinha here. Dom for Man City, that's okay. You don't have to change it. It's fine.
Better.
I'm also looking at the votes. It seems like it doesn't matter if you change it or not. Robbie, you're winning. You're winning the polls. There's no words I've been said to convince people. But what I'll say is, Dom, my question then would be back to you about Man City when Barca had possession. Could you give that ball over to Lamine Yamal?
Lamine Yamal. Yeah. Okay.
Lamine Yamal. So is Gavardiol getting any help in your Man City team?
See, I don't know how. It depends on how the tracking goes here, because these wingers can drop deeper to kind of try and double up on Lamine potentially, or you could have someone like Kovacic kind of drifting out wide to kind of help. I don't know how they would actually approach this. I think if you can find Lamine in a 1 versus 1, you've done your job, right? That's what you want to have. But I think in this scenario, you would, that's what you would be looking to do right here.
Yeah, and that's then could put a lot of onus on if Costa or Pedri can deliver that final ball, right? Because then Olmo and Lewandowski become your runners on that side. Same thing, and then you could put that Rafinha/Leo kind of at the back post, right? I'm just considering everything going very vertical. So yeah, and then Lewandowski and Olmo, you've three runners coming into the box, and then
Right,
at
yeah.
that point, it puts the onus on Koundé underlapping.
All right, cool.
Yep, it puts the onus on Koundé underlapping, and then Pedri and Gavi to make those, to deliver those final balls. And I think if
Right.
Barcelona is scoring against Man City, right, this is the most likely way that this is happening, right?
Right, yeah. So you have Lamine kind of distributing from there, and then you have runners going in.
Yeah, attracting some kind of attention, right? And then the same thing like Man City wants to do, Gabi and Pedri required to, and then Koundé as well in the position that you moved him to with that, where you see at the arrow. Same thing. Yeah, like then can Barcelona keep, because that's the thing about the press, right? When Barcelona have the ball, rest defense is so important here because of where they want to win the ball back. And if Barcelona can then win the ball back in those positions, then you're in a good spot. And then you also look here when Barcelona have the ball, if Foden's forced to come back and defend Gabi, right there, you can move him up a little bit there. Yep. Right. Holland just alone on an island up there. Right. And then and he's not going to see distribution if Barcelona can pin them back. And so this is the moment I think in the game where I'm creating that Barcelona goal or 2 or 3 or whatever it is. Right. Because again, Kovacic is being pulled out to the wing in this instance because Diaz has to track the runners, as has Akanji. They have to track the runners of Olmo and Lewandowski. And then Rico Lewis as well. You see with Rafinha being such a wing, being such a threat coming forward, playing into space, Rico Lewis also in this situation and pinning him back, right? And now Barcelona are going to win those balls in and keep them in. Because again, the only place really where I think Man City has the advantage is you look on that right side for Man City. It's Savinho against Balde. In theory, that is the one area where they would have, where they would have that advantage. But on the other side, it's then Rafinha against Rico Lewis. And with Barcelona in possession, I trust them in that juncture as well because Lamine Yamal on one side needs help. But as I said, that's it. That's it. I think from my side because I'm losing the poll, and it seems like people like Rafael better than any tactics idea I have.
Yeah, that's kind of what you get with these big names. But yeah, to your point, Dan, I think this is how Brighton scored their goal. I don't even remember anymore. But it was actually Kyle Walker instead of Rico here. He was getting torn apart because he didn't know who to track. Right? Who was it for Brighton? Was it? I don't even remember. Someone who was making these diagonal runs into the box, similar to
I
Rafinha,
think
and he
it
was.
was Matt O'Reilly.
Or was it? I don't honestly, I don't remember. But yeah, it was kind of putting Walker into this situation when he has Mitoma on his right, and he has another runner who's going more centrally or diagonally into the box here. So he didn't really know who to track because he had two players there. And if you don't get support from a winger who Pep wants his outlets to be available, right? But if you drop him here, you don't have an outlet, as Dan said, you have Haaland on an island, that's it. But if you leave Sabino up there and then suddenly Walker or Rico Lewis, whoever this is, has a problem with these two players, right? So in that sense, Pep would have a headache. He would have a dilemma to solve in that sense. I think similar thing would happen, Robbie, with your team where you have instead of Rafinha, we have Leao. Obviously, different type of runner, different type of player off the ball, especially. So how did you envision your side attacking Man City?
First of all, as you said, they either do a 4-4-2 mid block, and
Mm-hmm.
when you their weaknesses will always be on the flanks, and
Mm-hmm.
that's why I went for Trent and Lamine and Leo with Balde because they
Mm-hmm.
had too much value and too much pressure on the flanks. So the center will definitely get exposed because they will try to overload the flanks and leave the free mans in the center. And as you said, the runners, the Olmo and Lewandowski, and either Leao and Balde at the end of the cross can be very dangerous. And even reading in the second balls with Casado or Pedri, and I don't think they can sustain that pressure because, as I said, Lamine 1 versus 1 with Guardiola is an
Mm-hmm.
1v1 that is in our favor because we saw
Mm-hmm.
in the Euros how that went out, and
Mm-hmm.
that's it. Practically, you need to overload the flanks because that's where they always concede, even with Wolves, Brighton. It's a transitional game where the far space will get opened, and at the end of the crosses from Lamine, which are one of the, I think he's the best crosser in the world at
Mm-hmm.
right now. Him with Trent, leaving that back post for Leo, who has a great heading ability, and Lewandowski, as we all know, it's
Mm-hmm.
a mismatch in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree.
that's
I want to add that
yeah.
I agree with him. By the way, I want to add that.
Yeah, that is a good point because you do have Lamine and Trent on this side who are elite distributors. Both of those players, Trent from this inverted position or Lamine from a wide position or even a more inverted one, they can both put these passes and these crosses, and then you have Olmo, Lewandowski, potentially Pedri from the second plan kind of coming in as well. And then Leao can either receive in this area right here, and then what he does, he just runs with the ball. And if Walker is there, he won't stop him, right? He won't stop him. Neither will Savinho, especially Savinho won't stop him. So you do have that potential, and then Balde obviously would be able to come in as well uh, and do this, and then Leao. Let me just put this here would carry the ball into the box basically, or he's not that much of a player that runs onto the ball into space like Rafinha, but he can, as Robbie said, so he does have that presence and in this area it can be found at the end of these crosses. So I think both teams, I'm gonna stop the sharing here. Both teams, to you guys' point, both teams have their clear tools to actually beat this Man City, which is kind of weird to say because we see Man City as this very complete elite team, which they are, to be
Not
fair.
this
But
season, though. Not
um,
this season.
not this season, not this season. But
Also,
yeah,
Dan, you'll be heartened that you're now 60-40. If you fight a little bit, you may just win the game.
I mean, well, I voted, so I don't. I mean, did you count my vote?
Well, there are many people now, more than you for sure. So now it's 60-40.
right. If you guys can share the poll, just give the retweet so that more people can see. And guys, there's 800 of you watching. If you go on our Twitter account, just click on the polls because we don't have the polls here. sadly, because the restream doesn't give us this option. So you have to vote on Twitter. If you can vote, Dev, can you just quickly pull up both teams once again so people can see them once more?
Yeah.
And then we'll just chat for 5 more minutes and give people some more time, and then we can
I
conclude this.
can definitely do that. There we
Right.
go.
So these are the teams, guys. Dan's Barca, Robbie's Barca. If you could go to Twitter and just give a couple of votes, we have 16 votes, which is not bad, but we can do better, and it's quite close, to be honest. It's actually 43-56 now, so a couple more.
Dan's winning. Dan's doing a late thing down there.
A
Do
remontada is
we have a
coming.
90th minute goal, or do we have a stoppage time goal coming in?
I mean, do we have any big Rafinha
Waiting for
fans?
one.
I mean, really, it's the big Eddie Rafinha fans, because I know like Diego Costa and Saliba are not two players that like move the needle or excite people. So like, I do want to say, and I do want to add too with my budget that I do still
You have
have
Messi on the bench.
Messi on the bench. So
There you go.
remember, I used my last 25 million on this guy named Lionel Messi. So if you have any belief in my team, just throw that in there too. So I just I don't want to end this with a Messi conversation, but I really sat on this for a little bit about like, can I jam Messi into that team for 25 million?
There you go.
But I think just almost defensively what he adds, like, again, Messi, I mean, I'm loving watching him with Inter Miami because I do. People know, I do work with MLS. And so I love watching Lionel Messi, and it's great fun. And it also, like, the idea of Lionel Messi coming off your bench even at his age, whatever it is, like, I don't care if he's playing MLS, like, Messi coming off your bench and attacking space the way that Olmo does, because I will add that too. I was 50-50 about keeping Olmo in the starting lineup. But I do think that the number 10 for Hansi Flick is so essential that you can't really substitute him for anybody else. And I was looking around world football, like, who else I would add to this. The other thing too, instead of Rafael Leao, I was considering Luis Diaz for 80 million. I think it was really interesting to me looking at this that Luis Diaz is 5 million more than Rafael Leao. So that was really where I sat on this one as well. Like, against Man City, would I put Rafinha as the 10 to defend, and would I put Luis Diaz on the left side, right? If I had kept Araujo, like, let's say I went with Kubarsi Araujo like Robbie did, the consideration I had was to then use that 80 million that I used on Saliba, exactly 80 million, on Luis Diaz, and putting him on the left and putting Rafinha as the 10. But I didn't really – I like the idea of a 10 playing as a 10 against Man City because of all the reasons we just talked about. So just like going through my thinking a little bit there, that was kind of what I went with. And again, it's no disrespect to Costa, because people know that I'm already in the doghouse for what I said about Costa the last few years. Just that I didn't see him this good. I don't want to think that Costa's ceiling is not high enough. But again, if you ask me still Gabi against Costa, I'm still going to go with Gabi over Costa at the moment. So that was my argument. And then again, the other surprise is that I didn't even put other left backs on my team selection. I just decided to go with Balde because I left back is such a difficult spot to replace. And then the last thing I'll mention here is I had Florian Wirtz at 120. He's 120 million euros right now on Transfermarkt. So the decision was, I'm also now reconsidering if I had Araujo and Ter Stegen healthy, maybe I think Wirtz might be the only spot where I can upgrade Olmo there. But again, at 120 million, it's just not worth it, right? Like, Florian Wirtz at 120 million, does he make Barcelona that much better, right, than two players that I could add? Probably not, right? So I just wanted to have people like go through and then to Theo Phyllis's, how would Barcelona deal with Savinho? I think both Robbie and I have the same problem with Balde, and the answer is Balde. Defensively, I think he's underrated. I think he's underrated defensively, and that's again why I added Saliba to my left center back spot. That Balde then does have help with Savinho through Saliba. So there's my final argument that Savinho is going to be a threat, and Balde will have help through my Saliba pick. So.
Any thoughts from Robbie, and then final closing thoughts from you, Dom, because you haven't said which team you feel had the better chances of winning. So, Robbie, final thoughts from you.
I don't think Savinho is a problem, actually. We saw the Balde matchup against Olise, and Balde win that comfortably. And as I said in a tweet, if Guardiola didn't exist, Balde would have been the best left back in the world this season. Even last season, we saw how much we suffered against him defensively wise because Cancelo wasn't even half of that. We Dembele had a mess with him. Like he he cooks him all night. He left us open way too many times.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think kind of the my biggest takeaway from this is I was really surprised or pleasantly surprised that both of you guys decided to make only two changes. So you
Yeah,
had
me too.
150 million, which is not it's a lot of money. 150 million. Barca could only dream of having that much budget,
They've
right?
only had that in like 7 years
Yeah,
once.
exactly. And even in the dream scenario, you both kind of went with two signings out of four. You could have picked four, and granted, four big players with 150 is not enough, not possible, right? But still, to have only two signings for a dream team, so to speak, that was. It just goes to show that we do have a good team already, right? This Barca side does have good players already. We don't have complete players. Maybe we don't have players that have reached their peaks or their maturity, or whatever you want to call it. But we do have good players. In terms of who I would pick, is it's difficult because I kind of feel bad. We didn't really tell Dan, okay, you can bring back Araujo, you can bring back Ter Stegen. I feel bad about that. So maybe he would have, made different choices based off of that. So I'm not gonna pick anyone
Maybe
just now, but
Maybe
but
not. Maybe not. Maybe I would have, I said I went through it, like, I might have just kept
mhm,
the same team. I
yeah.
mean, so I don't know.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's so many hypotheticals as well because Kunde and Lamine, we keep talking about this, Dev, and I talked about this on Dan's stream the other day as well. The way Kunde and Lamine interact with each other, to me, that's invaluable, right? Okay, Kunde is obviously a better defender than the Trent, and Trent is a better distributor creator than Kunde.
Yep.
But would the combination and the synergy be the same, right? It's difficult to tell that. And Kunde does such a good job of this marking Lamine, knowing when to move and how to move to make Lamine more potent or more enabled in that sense. So it's all about that forming that synergy as well. So it's difficult to put Trent into this hypothetical situation and say, okay, he would do exactly the same as Kunde or maybe better than Kunde and whatnot. So I like both teams, to be honest. I'm going to be very diplomatic here and say I like both.
Come on. You
Yeah,
can't be
yeah.
diplomatic. You need to make choices.
No choices for me this time around, but I do like that both guests have actually prepared good teams, and of course tactically I would have loved to you know give them more spotlight, but not this time around. This time around, I did the tactics board and I tried to recreate your teams as much as possible. But obviously, maybe you had some more ideas, and we'll revisit that in the future. But for now, this was a good first test episode. I think we do have around 900 people. People are just joining just now, so if we kept this going, it would have probably been even better. How's the voting going, Dev?
Well, yeah. So let's get back to the vote. Now we have 25, not too many, but it's okay. It's what it is. And with Robbie winning with 60% of the votes and Dan with 40%, which is not bad because Dan was a little while back. Dan did not have any votes. So I would say there are people in the audience who love Dan's tactics and who believe in the conceptual way he explained. And then there are people who have gone with Robbie's choice of Trent and Leao. So I mean, the football is about we all have our opinions about football, and this is mostly about to have some fun and have some engagement, which we I think did. What will happen in real life, nobody knows. So hopefully, in time, if we can sign any of these players, that will prove whether we get to experience that or what have you. But that said, thank you very very much, Dan, for coming in and with your passion, with your preparation. You're so prepared, like all the numbers just rolling off your tongue, off your teeth. You just work so hard just to prepare for this. This is insane professionalism. Thank you so much. It's really, really worth emulating. Robbie, great. Very, you're from the heart. You explained so well. And people love the way you think about the game, obviously, and the logical explanation that you gave, and obviously you're a passionate fan for Barca. So thank you for responding to our request and coming in and giving 1 hour of your time, which is I really, really appreciate it a lot. And to the people who are watching it, the 960 odd people, thank you. We will possibly do it more. We'll do these setups more. We'll improve ourselves. We wanted to learn from this. So if you have ideas, do share and let us know what we can do better or differently. And we'll continue doing this along with all the other stuff that we do. And hopefully, Dan, we'll see you on your podcast sooner than later, and we'll definitely wait for that transfer piece that you want to work on. So because we ourselves did a small discussion on transfers today with Dom, so that should be coming out. So yeah, all's well that ends well. This is the international break, so hopefully our players come back safe and sound. And with that, we will now close the stream. So thank you for joining, and we'll see you on the next one. But this series will continue going forward. Thank you, guys. And as they say, Visca el Barça.